All right, appreciate everyone joining us for Coach Franklin's weekly press conference. We'll start with an opening statement from Coach, and then we'll open it up for questions. Coach?
So first of all, obviously with September 11th and everything that's gone on in our country, and the fact that it was 22 years ago is kind of mind-blowing to me. I remember I was at the University of Maryland, and I think a lot of people forget that the Pentagon had gotten hit as well. We don't really talk about that as much, and we had a number of former players and players' parents that were at the Pentagon. So that memory is burned into my mind. So just wanted to take a minute and recognize that and how fortunate we are for the men and the women and the first responders and people that serve our communities and serve our country. So we're very, very appreciative of that and don't take it for granted. In terms of our last game, again, phenomenal crowd, especially when you consider the fact that it was a 12 o'clock game. We were supposed to get bad weather, and right now I think after 2 games we're averaging 109,661 fans, which is great. We go to Illinois, which is a tradition around here, opening on the road in the Big Ten. We love it. I actually called Pat a little bit ago, and I think they're talking about coming out with a new schedule. So we're going to try kind of reverse psychology and ask to be on the road this year to see what happens this coming up year. But it's going to be an orange out. Should be a great atmosphere. I think last year we opened at Purdue, it was a blackout. I think we went to Auburn, it was an orange out. So it'll be a great environment for college football. We're looking forward to it. When you talk about just kind of some of the summary of the last game, offensive player of the game was Drew Allar. Defensive player of the game was Dom DeLuca. And then special teams was Alex Felkins. And then our D-Squad players of the week was Jack Lambert and Liam Powers with the offense, Jace Tuddy and Kavion Keys with the defense, and then Jace Tuddy also on special teams. Jace is doing a really good job for us, a young man out of Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Some more notes, just some positives on that game. We talked about getting better, the importance of getting better each week. And if we do that, we'll like where we're at come the end of the season. And we talked about getting better specifically in the metrics that we measure and talk about each week. For example, early in the season, missed tackles, missed assignments. We went down in both of those categories. Really cool. We were able to play 80 players in the game. As you guys know, some of our veteran starters really only played a handful of plays in the game, which is great. Defensively, we were able to get off the field. We had 10 3-and-outs. We had 2 turnovers. You combine that with the offense being really efficient. In today's college football, to say that our offense had 91 plays in the game is really unusual. Really unusual. I thought special teams, we were more consistent, specifically with how we kicked the ball. Real positive for us is starting fast, and the last 2 games, the offense has started the opening drive of the game with a touchdown. And then middle 8, we were able to score a really nice 2-minute drive with no timeouts at the end of the half, and then start the second half with a touchdown as well. So 14 points there in the middle 8. Areas for growth. Situational football, situational football, situational football. It's 4th and 1. We go punt safe. They go hard count. We jump off sides. The whole reason for going punt safe and 4th and 1 is to anticipate and expect a hard count and not jump off sides and give them a first down. In some ways, that equates to like a turnover. We were getting the ball back. We gave it back to them. And then too many free yards. We were excellent the week before in penalties, and then we weren't as good this past week when it came to penalties, so we got to get that cleaned up. On to Illinois and Coach Bielema. Obviously, he's got a ton of history as a head coach, and specifically a head coach in the Big Ten Conference. I've known Brett for a while. He goes on the Nike trip that me and my wife go on as well. him and his wife, so we've gotten to know him both personally and professionally. Got a ton of respect for him and what he's been able to do. I think it's also helpful. You got two head coaches in the Big Ten that have been head coaches in the SEC to sort of have that perspective in our conference meetings. I think is helpful. The defensive coordinator, Barry Looney. You talk about them and what they do. Excuse me, I said defense coordinator. I mean offensive coordinator, Barry Looney, and what they do. They're a spread team. 11 personnel is what they're going to base out of. They're trying to find ways to get the ball in the number one's hands. Isaiah Williams, who feels like he's been playing at Illinois forever. And then I think the Luke Altmaier, the young man who transferred from Ole Miss, has really helped them. He came in the Toledo game and drove them right down the field, and I thought last week was able to make plays with not just his arm but with his legs as well. I think he had a 72-yard touchdown. And then defensively, Aaron Henry. As we know, Bielema's also involved on the defense. But they're a odd front or an oaky front defense. We've been impressed with their personnel. Been a lot of talk about their personnel all off season. Defensive end number 4, Jerzon Newton. Defensive tackle number 88, Keith Randolph. Linebacker number 8, Tariq Barnes. Defensive end rush number 17, Gabe Jackus. And then their nickel and corner number 14, Xavier Scott. And then their safety number 10, Miles Scott. Guys that we got a lot of respect for on tape. There was a lot of buzz about these guys in the preseason as well. And we're looking forward to the opportunity to compete against them. And then on special teams, Robbie Disher. And then obviously when you talk about personnel, their punter is an Australian young man who, as we know, there's been a bunch of Australians come over that have kind of taken over college football. He's their punter, number 19, Hugh Robertson. And then again, their punt returner, Isaiah Williams as well. So it's going to be a really good challenge. Today will be our first time to really get on the field and practice in pads. We'll do that today and tomorrow. Get into our jog throughs and walk throughs on Thursday, then Fast Friday, and then we'll be getting on the plane and flying to Champaign. I think the game is 11 o'clock their time, 12 o'clock our time, so it'll come fast, and we need to be prepared for that. We've got a young roster with a bunch of young players that'll be traveling for the first time, and make sure that they understand what that is going to be like, and the difference in travel and all the responsibilities that come with that, so that we can reduce distractions as much as possible. So open up the questions.
Let's go to Rich Garcella, and Mark, you're on deck.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good, Rich. How are you, man?
I'm great. Thanks. James, how prepared, how equipped is Drew for his first road start?
Well, like I keep saying with Drew, he's doing all the right things and taking all the necessary steps. We expect it to be a challenging road environment, but we didn't wait until this week to prepare for that. Whether it's crowd noise or whatever it may be. We've done that all training camp. Obviously, we'll major in it this week as well. But again, he's doing all the right things in terms of preparation, in terms of watching film, in terms of nutrition, hydration, sleep. Getting more and more comfortable and confident in his leadership role on the team. So again, all these things are first, and it's hard for me to sit here and tell you what he will be like and what we will be like in these situations until we've been through them. So, for us, it's to do everything we possibly can to prepare as a team and specifically for Drew as well, to get him as prepared as we possibly can for what it will be like to be on the road. I do think his game last year at Purdue, was helpful. But most importantly, I want to make sure by Friday night when we're going to bed that we've done everything we possibly can to have him and the team prepared to go play and play well.
Let's go to Mark Wogenrich, and then Frank, you're on deck.
Hi, James. How are you?
Hey, Mark. Good, man. How are you?
Appreciate it. Good, thanks. In the 2021 season, did you go back and conduct any analytics of the Illinois game, specifically the overtimes? And if you did, are you using any of that analysis now? How is that benefiting you now?
Yeah, it's hard to do analytics on something that you don't have enough data on, right? I don't know if there's ever been and ever will be again a nine overtime situation like that. So it's hard to go back and say, well, I'm going to study the analytics in that situation because there's just not a whole lot of examples of it. I think obviously what it taught everybody in the country is you better have enough 2-point plays or low red zone plays that you have enough to go to if you get into a situation. Obviously the interesting thing is the whole idea of the 2-minute rule changes is to avoid that. It didn't necessarily play out that way. So yeah, we studied your normal 2-point play situations and overtime situations, but not necessarily back from 2021 in that game.
Frank Bodani, and then Mike, you're on deck.
Hi, James. Good afternoon.
Hey,
How are
Frank.
you?
Good, man. How are you?
Oh, good. Drew told us about how he's really not, he doesn't take to being the center of attention. That's not his style. That's not natural to him. How do you think he's taken on that part of his game? Being a leader, growing in that way, handling those situations from that point of view?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons what's allowing him to play so well is he's really not focused on those things. He's focused on preparing to be the best quarterback. And to be honest with you, we're not asking that of him in year one. You know, we want him to focus on doing his job to the best of his ability. Obviously, playing that position, there's an aspect of that comes with it. But I think he's spending all his time and energy on how can he be the best quarterback for Penn State, and we're not asking that of him. It's kind of similar to a couple years ago, you know, when Mike got here and we kind of made some changes to the offense. You know, I think it was that year. I don't think we took Sean Clifford, if I remember correctly. We didn't take him to Big Ten Media Day because I wanted him focused on just doing his job that year. He's doing a nice job, and I think he's doing a nice job of focusing on the things that matter most right now.
Let's go to Mike Gross, and then Donnie, you're on deck.
James, good afternoon. How are you?
You too, Mike.
It's a question about defense, coaching it and playing it. On the one hand, I assume you want guys to be real aggressive and kind of play with their hair on fire and make disruptive plays. And the other side of that is being gap sound and not trying to do too much and being where you're supposed to be. So is there ever an extent to which you have to play those two things off of each other, compromise one in order to, not compromise, but play those two off of each other?
No, because I think they complement each other beautifully, right? Be super aggressive through your gap. Be very aggressive in your zone when the ball comes in your direction. Be very aggressive in your man coverage techniques, in your job and your responsibilities. An offensive lineman, your footwork, your gap, your responsibility on a double team and who you're working to in combination with the tackle or whatever it may be. Be very aggressive on game day based on your preparation. You know, same thing with the running back, same thing with the wide receiver, same thing with the coaching staff. So to me, you know, I don't think what you want to do is talk about them like they are separate entities. Those two things in great football can go hand in hand and can complement one another.
Let's go to Donnie Collins, and then Ben, you're on deck.
How you doing, James?
Good, Donnie. How are you?
Doing well. After the game, you
What's your
mentioned-
hat logo?
It's a catcher's mitt.
Awesome. Which one is this?
It's just a random catcher's mitt.
Oh, gotcha. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's one of my generic hats. But after the game, you said that you thought Drew last year, as the backup, did a good job preparing as if he was the starter. And Bo talked a little bit about that last week too. And I'm wondering from a coaching perspective, when you're looking at guys to see whether they're doing a good job of that, what kind of traits do you look for in those players who are doing a good job of it? And is it necessarily an easy transition to make for young guys who are used to starting throughout their high school careers?
Yeah, I think it's a really hard challenge. Most of these guys have always been the best players. They've never not been the guy. So it is a huge challenge. Just physically, the love of playing the game, the emotional impact on it, and to be honest with you, the parents struggle with it a lot of times. So yeah, I think that is challenging. But I think it's a good question. I think first of all, I think Bo is wired right. His preparation is excellent. He's a very thoughtful young man. I think he's a very driven young man, and extremely competitive. So it's funny because I think if you asked our players, they would say they're sick of hearing that from me. I talk to the guys all the time. I met with the freshmen yesterday about, that was one of the topics. Are you preparing as if you were the starter right now? Because if you don't, then this time next year you're going to be upset with your role because you're not going to be ready. I met with the second year players on Sunday after practice and had a similar conversation with them. Are you preparing as if you're the starter? So I think it's really an important lesson for all of our guys to learn, not just for football but in life. You may be the assistant manager one day on your job, and you want to be the manager, and your number gets called, and you get the opportunity to serve that role, and you're not ready. So we talk about it all the time, but I think with Bo, I think we're pretty comfortable and pretty confident that Bo is preparing like a starter, very similar to how I think Drew was last year. And to be honest, I think Bo did last year as well. And I think that's what's allowed him to be successful. What I think we're doing a better job as a coaching staff, and it's not easy to do when you're trying to do everything you possibly can to get your starter ready, and your backup quarterback has a different style. Making sure that you're playing to his strengths as well. A lot of people say they'll do that. A lot of people say that. We're going to play to the strength of our personnel, and they don't. So I think we're doing a really good job of that. I think Coach Yursich is doing a really good job of that, is saying, okay, as a first-time starter, what does Drew do well? And let's play to those strengths, and hopefully that grows every week, the things that he's comfortable and confident with. And then the same thing, okay, Bo, in your role, what are the things that you're comfortable with, and how can we play to your strengths? And they're really separate packages, which is challenging and difficult for us to get them both ready, but also can create challenges and difficulty also on the defensive coordinator and the defenses that we face, because they got to spend time on both.
Let's go to Ben Jones, and then Corey, you're on deck.
Hey James, greeting from the Midwestern block.
Ben, where are you today?
I'm in Minnesota, so.
Till when?
Till the weekend, and then I'll be back in town next Tuesday.
So are you going to Illinois?
Yes.
You leave Friday? You leave Friday or Saturday?
Friday, I'm just going to drive down.
How far to drive?
Like 6 hours and change.
Oh, it is 6 hours. Okay.
Well,
we look forward to seeing you. Everybody was talking before I came in about how much they miss you being here.
Yeah, I bet they were. You talked about this being a deep team, and maybe one of the deeper ones that you've ever had. How do you think these guys are handling being a deep team? Because I think there have maybe been little breadcrumbs along the way that you would like to see that be a little bit better. And how do you manage that? I mean, you can have all the talent in the world, but if the vibes aren't quite where you want them to be, that might not matter.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were just discussing this as a staff. We got some young players that we're excited about, and they are going to play. But every time you give the guy who's the 3 deep on your roster reps, that's taking away reps from the 2 deep. So it's this balancing act, and I think it's important that everybody kind of embraces that and understands that. But it's amazing. I mean, that's one of the challenges of being a college football coach, right? Is you got 85 guys on scholarship, you got right around 120 guys on the team, give or take, depending on the program. And you want everybody in that locker room to feel appreciated, and that's almost impossible. You want all the parents to understand the process and embrace the process. That's almost impossible. So we just try to talk about it as much as we possibly can. I think for the starters and the veteran starters who played a ton of football, I think they're great with it. It's the guys who are starting for the first time or the guys that are in the 2 deep that are fighting and competing for every rep they get. The challenge is, okay, say you get a game like last week and you were able to get those 3s in the game, well, that works out really good, and in your mind, well, the 2s will play a ton the rest of this year. Well, they may not. It just depends on how some of these games go in terms of your rotation or in terms of how guys have practiced that week or what makes sense based on the score and the time and the situation. There's so many things that kind of go into it. So just trying to balance it and trying to have as many discussions as you possibly can. That's why your roster management and your game management is critical. And with new staff, I got to make sure everybody's on the same page. And that's one of the reasons why we have a staff meeting every single morning at 7 a.m. to talk about these things, right? To kind of go through, okay, let's go through the depth chart now based on last week. Any changes, okay? On Thursday, let's have a discussion about rotation for the game. What are we thinking? Because I want to have this discussion now rather than Saturday morning, and the coordinator sees it differently than you do, or the head coach sees it different than the position coach. Let's work these things out on Thursday and Friday, so it's not Saturday morning right before the game that I have a different expectation, the coordinator has a different expectation, the player has a different expectation. So it's just important that we talk about it as much as we can and get everybody on the same page. The other thing I would say is we have a parent meeting every year before the season starts, and then we do it in the spring as well and try to talk through some of these issues. And I would say for the most part, we've been pretty good there. And it's never going to be as perfect as you'd like it to be.
Last question from the Zoom, Corey Geiger.
Hi, James.
Hey, Corey.
The team has played so well. I'm sure you'd love to win every game by 20, 30 points. But are you as a coach curious how to get maybe into a game where it's close, tight, got tough situations, so you can find out some more about your own team and how they may handle these different situations as opposed to what you've had so far?
Yeah, again, that goes back to I just want to get better. I just want to get better every single week. That's also why we challenge them in practice all through training camp and all through the season. It's not just the Saturdays that we're competing and dealing with situations. It's all the time. It's all the time. But I think your point is a good one. We're going to learn more and more about our team every week. And there's going to be different ways that we're going to have to find ways to win. And good teams will find different ways to win each week based on the opponent, based on the schemes, based on the matchups, based on the challenges, based on the weather, whatever. So we've been able to check a lot of those boxes during training camp. Practicing in the rain, there's a ton of value in that. Even though all the players are looking at the indoor facility, like, why do we have that? Making sure during the season that not only are we getting the scheme-specific work from the D squad, but we're also getting the good-on-good work, from a speed and competition standpoint. Back to that depth, I also think our D squads are better than they've been in the past, and that's helpful. So all these things, going on the road and playing your first road game in the Big Ten, there's value in that. And we'll continue to learn things about our team and and our program as the year goes on. So, for me, I just want to get better. I want to get better this week in practice, and I want to get better on Saturday. And if we continue to do that, then we'll get those questions answered.
All right, for those in the room who have a question, please raise your hand. We'll take a mic to you. We'll start with Mark over here on the right.
Hey James, how are you?
Good, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great. You've been able to manage Olu's snaps, obviously, with the way some of the scores have played out. But I wonder, when you go into a game, do you have an area, a limit that you want to keep him at, or is that dictated by circumstance? And who all is going into making those decisions? Is it you, Phil, Frank, whoever? Yeah,
so really those numbers were based on practice, and those, the games are more like the way you described it, as it's situational. If we can get him out, then we wanted to get him out. You look at last week, if we wanted to get him out, we wanted to try to get him out as early as we could, and we were able to do that. But the games, it's all what the game dictates to allow us to go out and win and be successful, and allow him to put really good tape out there and show everybody what a phenomenal player is, and he's the best offensive lineman in college football. So to me, it's more about managing last spring in the spring game. It's about managing practice. It's about managing the games based on the situation. And that's same thing I talked about. Those are the type of discussions that are happening in the staff meeting at 7 a.m. They're the discussions that are happening in my office with Trout and Frank to make sure we're on the same page, and then also during the game, to make sure I know who's going in the next series and why, and make sure we all see it the same way.
Over here on the left, Jared.
Hey, Jared.
How's it going?
Good.
Obviously, it's very early in the season, and I know that AP poll doesn't factor into BCS anymore. But is your ranking in the national polls something you talk about with your coaches and players? Not at all?
No, sir. No. We wanted to find a way to get a win the first week, get a win the second week, and then find a way to get a win this week. As long as we continue to get better and do the things that I think we're capable of doing, then all those things will take care of themselves. Where the only thing I would say on that I think helps is I think being a part of those discussions helps you at the end of the season. But I think TCU is a really good example last year. I think we were a really good example last year that there's ways to still get there. No matter where you were preseason or where you were early in the season, you just got to go out and handle your business and take a very mature approach to it. And the preseason polls and week 2 polls really don't matter, right? So we have not spent any time talking about that as a staff or a team as I can remember.
Audrey.
Good afternoon, James.
Hey, Audrey.
How you doing?
Good.
I wanted to ask about 2 of your freshmen, King Mack. We've seen a lot of what's impressed you about him so far, and Jameel Lyons. We've also seen a good bit of. Is Jameel someone who is maybe in the yellow category or green category at this point?
Yeah. So when you talk about King, specifically King, he was a guy that we identified very early on in training camp based on his testing numbers, based on his strength numbers, based on his ability to pick up the defense, on his ability to make plays that we felt like he was going to factor in, and from a depth chart perspective on defense would factor in. So now it's okay, well, we need to get him involved in special teams. And, Coach Poindexter was comfortable with that. Manny was comfortable with that. Stacy was comfortable with that. So we kind of moved forward, and I think that will continue to grow. He's fast. He's aggressive. He's violent. The ball likes him. He's had the ability to make plays on the ball all during training camp as well. I think you'll just continue to see him gain confidence and have a really good year that his role will continue to grow. When you talk about Lions, specifically him, right now we still have him in the yellow category, like a lot of guys that played on Saturday. That could change, but again, part of that is based on how healthy we're able to stay. And all these guys on here that we've designated yellows, those can change real quickly. Obviously, in a perfect world, we hope we stay as healthy as we possibly can all season long. And then now we're just making those decisions based on, hey, this guy has moved up the depth chart, knows the defense inside and out, is making plays. But he's obviously shown in practice and in games that he belongs. And now it's him continuing to learn the package, understand the defense inside and out, so that maybe he's one of those guys by game 5 that we say, hey, we're going to green light him. Or he's a guy that we're just going to maximize the 4 games plus postseason. We'll see how it plays out. But the guys on the team love him, and they're excited to watch him in practice and in games. And I know the coaching staff, he's really earned the staff's respect as well. I'm really proud of him. I'm proud of a lot of these guys.
Back left, Andrew.
Coach, I know you had mentioned about going on the road in your Big Ten opener and kind of been a pattern, but what's also been a pattern is you haven't had a Big Ten opener not in week 1 since like 2019 or something like that. Is this how you would prefer it, to get a couple games under your belt before you get into conference play?
Well, I think for the most part, I think everybody, I can't speak for college football, but if I had to guess, most people would like probably the model that we all grew up with. That you play 2 out-of-conference games, 3 out-of-conference games if you're in a conference that plays 8, and then maybe save 1 conference game for later in the season, and then be able to break up your Big Ten schedule a little bit. I think that's ideal, but I think what's happened, if you look at most of the conferences and what the TV people want, is they want to be able to spread out those types of games through all 12 weeks of the regular season. So so there's some give and take there and understanding of that. But since we have led for so long, I'm assuming we won't have another one like that for another 10 to 15 years based on how it's gone.
On the right, Tyler.
Hey James, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
Great. We saw so many offensive linemen on Saturday. If I could ask about 3 specifically, 2 freshmen who had extended action in Anthony and Jamin, and then Nick Dawkins, who played most of the game. He was at center and saw some of them at guard. It was kind of a fresh look for us at Nick based on him missing so much time last year. Those 3 guys, now that you've had some time to evaluate the game film, what do you think you got out of it? What did they get out of that experience on Saturday?
Yeah, Dawkins is a guy, that again, I think that the staff and the players have a ton of respect for. He's done things the right way since he's gotten on campus. He's one of our more natural, charismatic leaders. He is super smart, very articulate, and I think he's really a team-first guy. So he is kept working and kind of waited for the opportunity to present itself, and it has, and he's run with it. And I think he's a really good example for a lot of players in our program, that if you keep a really good attitude and continue to work hard and prepare yourself, that at some point an opportunity is going to present itself and you got to take advantage of it. So I'm proud of him, and for him to get those reps and be able to get Hunter out of the game, at that position where he's the quarterback of the offensive line, but then also be able to play him at guard to create some more depth from that perspective, and also some position flexibility for himself was really good. And then Donk is a guy that we've been impressed with. I think you guys have heard me talk about during the recruiting process. He committed, pretty early on. We told him and his family to come to camp. They came to every single camp. He just kept getting better as a high school player, and showed up here, really far along developmentally. Really has done a nice job. I think you'll see his role continue to grow. And Javen is a guy that's super talented and comes from an unbelievable high school program. But he lacked some experience in pass pro, and that's an area that he's making tremendous strides in and improving. Really, two really good young players that we're excited about. There's others as well you didn't bring up, so I'm keeping it to these two specifically. But then Dawkins as well is a great example of a guy that was able to get in the game and played at a really high level, very similar to what we see at practice every single day.
Over here on the left, Mike.
Hey, James.
Mike?
The list is getting kind of long. Michigan, Iowa, Michigan State, Northwestern. And then when you throw in NIL, the portal, and collectives, what's the scrutiny and pressure like being a head coach these days, and how do you deal with it?
So what were you saying about the schools? I'm not sure.
They all at the very top of their programs in the past year, 18 months, have dealt with firings or investigations or suspensions.
Gotcha. And then what was your question again? I'm sorry.
Given all that, the scrutiny and the pressure, it seems to be more pressure than ever. And scrutiny, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I guess for me, I don't really spend a whole lot of time on what you just said and thinking about that. I try to take the same advice that I give and just try my very best to be the best version of myself for the players, for their parents, for the staff, for my family as I possibly can be. And that's not always easy, right? It's constant, and this is a challenging job. And as you guys know, I think I struggle with how to balance my time with my family as well as the team and my responsibilities for both. Having a strong wife, I think, is really important and helpful. Living in a college town, I think, is really helpful because my wife and kids being able to stop over to office like that. You guys come out to practice, usually at the beginning of practice, but at the end of practice, there's a ton of kids there, there's a ton of wives there, and families, and lettermen. And I do believe being in a college town, it helps. It really does, from a family perspective. So it's a challenge. I think this profession's always been challenging on people and on head coaches and on families. So I don't know if it's more so. Maybe we're just seeing a recent trend that's a little bit closer to home for us. But again, I try to take the same advice that I give my players and just try to be the best version I possibly can for the players, for their families, for my family, for the Penn State community, the best I possibly can. I'm going to make a mistake and say something silly every once in a while in a press conference that you guys will crush me on social media. But it also helps to have such good support from Matt Schuyler, which I've talked about before, and Neely Bendapudi, Dr. Bendapudi, our president, and Pat Kraft. That, I think, goes a long ways. I've talked about the importance of that for alignment, but I also just think it's important that Neely knows I have her back and she's got mine, and the same with Pat, and the same with Matt, and the rest of the board. I think all those things are really, really important. So I know that was a long answer, but I hope I answered the best I could.
Time for two more. We have Neil and then Bob.
Hey, James.
Hey, Neil.
You've talked about different levels of communication with parents, different groups of players. Where did you get the emphasis on communication? How much of it you put on it, and who are the people that you kind of looked up to who were good communicators along the way for you?
Yeah, so I think communication has always been a strength of mine and something that I've always thought was really important. But I'm going to be honest with you, it's evolved. You know, with the transfer portal, we're having conversations that we would never have had before. And I think you have to, because if not, the conversations are going on without you. And I think people can make poor decisions if they're not hearing it. Now, you know, what I think we've done a good job is we're not changing the conversation. We're just willing to have it now. And we're going to be very honest and transparent with how we see people. And, you know, that's where you are right now. That may not be where you are a year from now, but that's the truth of it. It's interesting, as some of these guys, they go into the transfer portal and they have success somewhere else. Even the guys that we've got. And they're like, oh, well, I just needed a fresh start. And that can be the case from time to time. But, you know, sometimes maybe it's just you're a year older and a year more mature. You know, those things play a factor into it. I would say that the communication isn't always a positive. My wife says I'm an over-clarifier, and she hates it. With someone that I don't really need to clarify, she usually knows what I'm saying as soon as I say it, but I have a tendency to say it 3 more times. And she doesn't like it, Neil. So I do think it's important for the staff. And again, that's why we staff meeting every single morning at 7 a.m. so there's no gray area. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody understands the expectation. I think it's the same thing. We have a team meeting every single day. Why? So everybody understands the expectation. And then, you know, I think there's been some changes. I think a lot of coaches in the past would talk to the parents about academics or social issues or things like that need to get cleaned up or corrected. A lot of coaches weren't talking about playing time. And I think now I'll have conversations, and so will the position coaches, you know, that maybe we haven't had in the past.
Hey, James.
How we doing?
I'm good. Over-clarifier. I like that.
Yeah, my wife does not.
You had talked earlier about a good defense is going to be aggressive, but also be disciplined, and it's important. A dual-threat quarterback like Altmaier is probably going to really test the discipline aspect of that. I was just curious, how did you think your defense played against the West Virginia quarterback who's got maybe some similar qualities? And whether it was good or bad at times, do you think the defense will be better for at least kind of facing that challenge already?
Yeah, I think we'll be more prepared this week based on going against West Virginia. I thought we played really well in the first 2 weeks. There was obviously times and moments that we would want to get cleaned up on offense, defense, and special teams. But I thought we did some really good things that are building blocks moving forward. I think that West Virginia quarterback is going to give a lot of people trouble. But I do think having faced him helps. Because the other thing I would say is you say, well, you got to face Bo in practice. And that is true. But a lot of times you don't really get to feel the impact of a dual threat quarterback until it's live. Because in practice, you're blowing the whistle. As soon as the quarterback runs and anybody comes anywhere near him, you're blowing the whistle. Or if it's a sack, you're blowing the whistle, where Bo maybe would have gotten out of a few of them. Or the quarterback of West Virginia gets out of a few of them. So until you really get it, you know, where it's game-like and full speed and live, it's hard to get that look in practice. And that's why facing these types of quarterbacks is so challenging.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.